The sky above Arvanis burned crimson. From the highest tower of the city of Valor, High Consul Sareth watched the horizon ripple with fire and movement. The predators were coming again, sleek, black shapes darting between the ruined forests, their metallic hides glinting under the dying sun. They weren't animals. They weren't even alive in the natural sense. They were the Maldrak, genetically engineered killers, bred for one purpose: to wipe the Arvani from existence. "Consul," said Advisor Wren, his voice trembling, "the eastern defense line has collapsed. The predators have breached Sector 12. If we do not send the distress signal now." Sareth didn't answer. She was already entering the final sequence into the Council's emergency beacon. The Arvani had never needed outside help before. They prided themselves on their self-reliance. But now there was no choice. A deep, mournful tone echoed through the command hall as the beacon pulsed into the void, an SOS that would travel across the stars, pleading for anyone, to come. They expected the Galactic Council to respond. The Council had always claimed to be the guardian of civilization, the bulwark against chaos. But 3 days passed, and the skies above Arvanis remained empty except for the predators. On the 4th day, everything changed. The air split open. The clouds tore apart. And a shadow fell over the capital. It wasn't a council fleet. It wasn't even anything Sareth recognized from her decades in politics. It was black-armored, massive, and bristling with weapons that seemed more like predatory instincts than machinery. The lead ship was so large it blotted out the sun, and its hull bore a single name in angular script: TDS Vigilant. The communications channel lit up. A human face appeared, angular, pale, with eyes like cold steel. "I am Admiral Rook of the Terran Deathworlder fleet," the voice said, clipped and emotionless. "We have received your signal." Sareth swallowed. She had heard whispers about the Deathworlders. Every species had. Humans came from a planet so hostile that even its plants killed. They were predators, warriors, and survivalists by nature. The Council never invited them into formal politics. The few times their fleets appeared, worlds changed forever. "We are under attack by the Maldrak," Sareth began, her voice formal. "If you can." "We know," Rook interrupted. "We're dropping in now. Stay clear of the eastern quadrant." Before Sareth could even thank him, the channel cut out. The first strike came 20 minutes later. From orbit, the Deathworlders fired weapons unlike anything the Arvani had ever seen. The Maldrak vanished in brilliant columns of plasma fire that turned entire square kilometers into molten glass. Then came the dropships, black spears falling from the heavens, releasing human soldiers in heavy armor that bristled with guns, blades, and stranger tools the Arvani couldn't name. The battle lasted hours. The Maldrak had slaughtered Arvani forces for weeks, but against the humans, they died in droves. It wasn't just efficiency. It was violence, pure and unrestrained, honed into a military art form. By nightfall, the Maldrak were gone. Every nest was burned. Every factory where they were bred had been annihilated from orbit. The Arvani were saved. Or so they thought. Admiral Rook stood in the Consul's hall, his armor scorched but intact. Around him, the air smelled faintly of gunpowder and ozone. "You have our gratitude," Sareth said, bowing slightly. "You'll repay it," Rook replied flatly. The words froze the room. "What do you mean?" Advisor Wren asked cautiously. "You called us," Rook said. "We came. We expended ammunition, resources, and lives to secure your world. That cost will be repaid not in currency, but in allegiance." Sareth's eyes narrowed. "Allegiance? You mean to say?" "You will enter the Terran Protectorate," Rook continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "You will allow our ships free passage. You will dismantle your orbital defense grid so our fleet can protect you without interference. You will adopt Terran trade protocols. In return, no harm will come to you." Advisor Wren took a step forward, anger on his face. "This is occupation." Rook didn't blink. "No. This is protection. If we intended occupation, you wouldn't have a government to address me right now. The council chamber erupted in debate. Some argued they couldn't afford to refuse. Without the Deathworlders, the Maldrak would surely return. Others whispered that humans were far worse than any predator, and once you invited them in, they never left. Sarath asked for time to deliberate. Rook gave her 2 hours. In that time, Sarath wandered the war-torn streets. She saw Deathworlder Marines handing out rations to starving children. She saw them repairing broken comms towers and clearing rubble from hospitals. But she also saw the way they scanned every alley, every rooftop, like they were mapping the city for future control. It was while she was walking near the eastern ruins that she found it, a shattered Maldrak nest. Inside, buried under debris, she saw something that turned her blood to ice. A council insignia. It was stamped onto a data core, half melted from plasma fire. She pried it free and activated its flickering hollow display. The contents were damning: records of genetic sequences, design specifications, and deployment orders. The Maldrak had been built by the Galactic Council. The predators that had nearly ended her people were not an accident. They were a weapon unleashed for reasons she could only guess at. When Sarath returned to the consul's hall, Admiral Rook was waiting. "You found it, didn't you?" he asked without preamble. She met his gaze. "You knew." "Of course we knew," Rook said. "That's why we came instead of the council. They wanted you gone. We want you alive." "Why?" she demanded. "So you can claim us as subjects?" He didn't answer directly. "Instead," he said, "the galaxy is not kind to the weak, Consul. The Council plays its games with manufactured monsters. We play ours with open fleets. The difference is that when we take you under our wing, the only way you die is if we die first." 2 hours later, the Arvani officially joined the Terran Protectorate. The Deathworlders withdrew their ground forces but left behind a permanent orbital station above Arvani's. The Council issued no protest, perhaps because they had no proof of what Sarath had found. Or perhaps because they knew proof didn't matter. The Deathworlders had answered the SOS, and now the Arvani were theirs. From her balcony, Sarath watched the massive warships drift in the upper atmosphere, black against the stars. Her people were alive. Her cities would be rebuilt. The Maldrak were gone. And yet, she could not shake the feeling that the rescue had been the first step in a much longer game, one where the Arvani's fate was tied forever to a species from a Deathworld, whose mercy came only on their own terms. The Krell Dominion had not sent an SOS in over 4 centuries. To the galaxy, they were a proud and ancient power, sharp in diplomacy, sharper still in war. But the civil war that had burned across their outer colonies had left them exposed. When the CHRYTH swarm came, there were no fleets ready to repel it. On the eve of the swarm's arrival, Supreme Chancellor Verat stood in the Grand Senate chamber and did what his predecessors would have called begging. "Transmit the signal," he told his aide, the words tasting of ash. The aide hesitated. "To the council?" "To anyone," Verat said, staring at the holographic map that showed the swarm curling toward Krell Prime like a black tide. "If the council won't help, then whoever hears us will. There are still allies out there." The beacon pulsed into the void, a signal carrying coordinates, desperation, and the oldest coded plea in the Krell language: "Help US." 3 days passed. The swarm tore apart the colony of Haros 4. The council never replied. On the 4th day, something else answered. The night sky over Krell Prime bloomed with light as a fleet emerged from the dark between stars. Not sleek council cruisers. Not even the clumsy trade ships of mercenary aid groups. These were black-armored giants, scarred from ancient battles, their hulls plated like the hides of predators. They moved with terrifying precision, each warship sliding into orbit as if part of some instinctive hunting pattern. The name on the lead dreadnought's hull burned in white against black steel. TDS Iron Wrath. The comms lit up. A human appeared, broad-shouldered, eyes like storm clouds, uniform immaculate despite the faint scent of smoke on the channel's audio. "I am Captain Vera of the Terran Deathworlder fleet," she said. Her voice was deep, each word deliberate. "We intercepted your distress call. Verat felt the chamber around him grow tense. Everyone in the Senate knew the name Deathworlder. It was spoken in the same tone as a natural disaster, not out of disrespect, but because humanity was a force no one could control. Their homeworld, Terra, was a nightmare of toxic storms, shifting tectonics, and apex predators. The fact that they'd survived it and left it to build fleets like this made them the most feared warriors in the galaxy. "We expected aid from the Council," Verat said carefully. "Then you expected nothing," Vera replied. "They abandoned you." "We did not." The swarm arrived before dawn. The Deathworlders didn't wait for authorization. The Iron Wrath's spinal railguns lit the atmosphere with streaks of molten light, tearing through the swarm's advanced ships before they even breached the orbital line. Then came the orbital strike packages, shaped charges and kinetic slugs that fell like meteor showers, breaking apart the swarm's planetary landing craft before they touched soil. Krell Prime's soldiers watched from their fortresses as the humans fought like predators, no hesitation, no mercy, no wasted fire. The CHRYTH swarm had been the stuff of Krell nightmares for generations, yet against the humans, it looked like prey. Within 6 hours, the swarm was gone. Not repelled. Not beaten back. Erased. Verat summoned Captain Vera to the Senate the next morning. "You have our gratitude," he began. "The Krell Dominion is in your debt." Vera's gaze swept the chamber. "Good. Then you will honor that debt. Effective immediately, your orbital defenses will be dismantled. Terran Fleet Command will assume responsibility for defending Krell Prime." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Senator Rose stood, her voice sharp. "You want us defenseless? To hand over our skies to you?" "You were already defenseless," Vera said coldly. "If we had not arrived, you'd be bones in the dirt. We are not here to invade. But we will not allow another swarm or any other force to threaten a world under our protection." Verat felt the weight behind her words. Under our protection wasn't a request. It was a statement of fact. Privately, Verat confronted her. "This is occupation in all but name," he said. Vera studied him in silence for a long moment before replying. "We have no interest in ruling you. But our fleets answer to no one but Terra. We will not share your skies with weapons that might one day fire on us. Why respond to our call at all?" Verat demanded. "Why not let the swarm finish us and avoid this tension?" For the first time, her voice softened, barely. "Because there's something here the swarm was after. Something too dangerous to leave unguarded." It was only hours later that Verat learned what she meant. Beneath the old research district in the capital, Terran Marines had uncovered a vault sealed for centuries. Inside was an artifact unlike anything in Krell archives, a small crystalline sphere, thrumming with contained energy. When Verat confronted Vera again, she didn't try to deny it. "It's a stellar ignition core," she explained. "A weapon. Small enough to hide in your hand, powerful enough to set fire to a sun." The swarm was a distraction, a hired claw. Verat's stomach sank. "Hired, by who?" "The same ones who built them," Vera said. "The Galactic Council. They wanted this core. They wanted it badly enough to use a swarm to get it. That's why they ignored your call." The realization hit Verat like a blow. The Council, the supposed guardians of the galaxy, had orchestrated his people's destruction. And the only reason they'd survived was because the Deathworlders had beaten the Council to their prize. That night, the Terran fleet left orbit, but not without taking the ignition core with them. The Iron Wrath and its escorts vanished into the void, their hulls still glowing faintly from battle. No treaties were signed. No promises made. The Deathworlders didn't ask for territory, tribute, or political allegiance. They simply left, leaving Krell Prime with its skies stripped of defenses and its people in stunned silence. The Senate debated for weeks. Some saw the humans as saviors, others as opportunists who had taken what they wanted and gone. Verat, however, knew the truth. Humanity had not come for them, they had come for the weapon. The Krell had been an obstacle to be preserved, not out of kindness, but because it suited the humans' goals. And yet, when Verat stood on the balcony of the Senate and looked up at the stars, he felt something strange. Not fear. Not relief. Something in between. The Deathworlders had their own games, their own dangers, but they had also shattered the swarm like it was nothing. And in the echoes of fear they left behind, Verat wondered which would reach Krell Prime first, another swarm, or the Terran fleet. You never forget the sound of a Deathworlder fleet dropping out of FTL. It's not noise in the normal sense, it's pressure. The air in your lungs feels heavier. The ground trembles, even when you're still in orbit. And then the alarms go off, and you know someone, somewhere, sent a call they can't take back. This time, it was an alien SOS from the edge of nowhere. The briefing was short. Frozen rock world, hostile environment, local population under siege by biomechanical entities of unknown origin. Command didn't bother with diplomacy. They just told us, drop, neutralize threat, secure survivors. We didn't even know their name until later, the Rilith. Thin, spindly, glassy skin that refracted the pale blue light of their sun. Looked fragile enough to break in a stiff wind. The moment our dropship hit atmosphere, my visor fogged from the cold. The sky was a dull, bruised purple, split by streaks of tracer fire. The Rilith capital was little more than spires of black stone clustered around a half-frozen river, but half of it was burning. The monsters weren't subtle. They moved like living tanks, all serrated limbs and plated armor, their bodies half metal, half chitin. Every time one roared, you could feel it in your bones. We hit the ground running. I was point man for Alpha Squad, boots crunching through frozen ash as we advanced down a ruined avenue. The air smelled like burning metal. The Rilith civilians, what few we saw, clung to each other in doorways, eyes wide with the kind of terror that doesn't fade. Contact right. The call came just before one of the biomechs tore through the side of a building, scattering stone like paper. I didn't think, I just fired. My railgun slugs punched through the thing's armored chest, but it kept coming until Corporal Dela launched a thermal charge straight into its open maw. The explosion painted the snow in molten orange. By the end of the first hour, the streets were littered with corpses, theirs, not ours. But they kept coming. The Rilith fought beside us, though it was clear they weren't soldiers. Their weapons were ancient plasma rifles, overheating after a few shots. They fired from the hip, no formations, no tactics. If we hadn't been there, they wouldn't have lasted another day. We pushed them back block by block, until command authorized the big guns. Orbital fire inbound, came the voice in my comms. Mark targets. We planted beacon charges at the largest hive structures, ugly, jagged spires where the biomechs seemed to pour out of. Minutes later, the sky cracked open as our fleet rained kinetic hell on them. Entire city blocks vanished in columns of light and debris. When the dust settled, the hives were gone. The fighting stopped. Just like that. I should have been relieved. Instead, something nagged at me. The battlefield was quiet, too quiet. The Rilith leader, a tall figure draped in woven crystal cloth, approached our commander, Captain Reese. They spoke in low tones before she called me over. Show him, the Rilith said, his voice like brittle glass. We followed him to what was left of the central hive. Inside, half buried in rubble, was machinery. Not alien to us, alien to them. Human-style neural cores, combat processors, nanoforges. These biomechs hadn't evolved here. They'd been made. And the worst part? The manufacturing equipment bore Rilith markings. Reese turned to the alien leader. You built these. His eyes flickered with something like shame. We created them. As a weapon. Against another enemy. But they changed. They would not obey. I'd seen it before. You give war a body and a will, and sooner or later it stops asking who the enemy is. Reese didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just said, you understand that we can't leave you with this technology. The Rilith leader's hands trembled. It is all we have to defend ourselves. You called us for defense, Reese said, and we gave it to you. His tone shifted, not cold, not warm, just final. From this point forward, Rilith Prime falls under Terran oversight. No more weapons development without our authorization. No exceptions. The Rilith didn't cheer when we saved them. They didn't even thank us. Some stared with quiet relief. Others with quiet hate. I couldn't tell which was worse. We set up a small garrison near the river. Nothing fancy, just a few prefab structures, comms towers, and a rotating squad. Our job was to keep the Rilith alive, and keep them from making another mistake. I overheard Dela that night, cleaning her rifle. "Feels like we just put them in a cage," she said. I didn't answer. Because the truth was, she was right. But I also knew that if we left, they'd either build the BMX again, or someone else would build something worse. 2 days later, I walked the outskirts of the city. The snow was clean here, untouched by the battle. I passed a group of Rilith children chasing each other through the frost. They looked like light and glass in motion. One of them stopped, stared at me with those wide, refracted eyes, then smiled. It was the first smile I'd seen since we landed. Maybe that's the real reason we stay, I thought. Not for politics. Not for control. But because once you've seen a child smile after war, you can't walk away and let the fire come back. We shipped out the next morning, leaving the garrison behind. From orbit, I looked down at Rilith Prime, pale blue under its frozen clouds, fragile, beautiful. Command logged the mission as a success. The enemy destroyed. The survivors secured. The technology confiscated. But in my personal log, I wrote something different. We came because they asked. We stayed because they can't be trusted. And maybe that's what mercy looks like when you're from a death world. It's not free. It never was.